In the winter of 1959, a group of experienced hikers ventured into the northern Ural Mountains. They were young, capable, well prepared for the challenging journey ahead. Their expedition was meant to be a test of skill and endurance, a common pursuit for Soviet youth, led by Igor Dyatlov, a respected student and seasoned outdoorsman. They planned to traverse the unforgiving landscape and summit Otorten. They never completed their trek. Communication with the group ceased. A search party was dispatched. What they found ignited a mystery that endures to this day. The search team found the hikers' tent abandoned on Kholat Syakhl, Dead Mountain in Mansi. The tent had been sliced open from the inside. All the group's belongings were left behind: warm clothing, food, survival gear. Footprints led away from camp down the slope. Some tracks were made by bare feet, others by people in socks. It made no logical sense. Why would experienced hikers flee in sub-zero temperatures without protection? The discoveries that followed deepened the enigma. 9 bodies were found scattered at varying distances. 2 beneath a large cedar tree, lightly dressed, showing signs of trying to start a fire. 3 more between the tree and the tent, positioned as if trying to return. 4 found months later in a ravine, buried under snow. These last victims had severe internal injuries, crushed ribs, fractured skulls, with almost no external trauma. The Soviet investigation called it a compelling natural force. The vague conclusion and Cold War secrecy fueled speculation. Over decades, the story accumulated myths and conspiracies, theories, secret military weapons, UFOs, Yeti-like creature. The incident became a modern legend, where strange details often overshadow the human tragedy at its core. This video will set aside myths and focus on facts. The goal of this examination is to provide a calm and clear walkthrough of the Dyatlov Pass incident. We will move step by step through the known evidence. Our approach will be forensic and respectful. This is not a horror story. It's a tragic event that deserves a factual explanation. We'll piece together the timeline, analyze the physical evidence, review the scientific theories. By focusing on documented, verifiable material, we strip away sensationalism and seek a rational understanding of what happened on Kholat Syakhl in February 1959. The journey begins with the setup. We'll introduce the 9 hikers, backgrounds, their experience, their expedition goals. We'll set the time and place, the Ural Mountains in deep winter, and the Soviet wilderness hiking culture. Knowing who they were is the first critical step. It gives us the foundation and shows their competence. It also shows how extreme conditions could test them beyond limits. Next, the discovery, the damaged tent, the abandoned equipment, the trail of footprints leading into the darkness, where each body was found, their state of dress, the surrounding environment. This lays out the core puzzle pieces. We'll show the scene as investigators first saw it, strange and disturbing. It demands a logical, coherent explanation. Finally, we calmly evaluate evidence and theories. Autopsy findings, signs of hypothermia, perplexing internal injuries. We'll review explanations, the initial Soviet conclusion, modern scientific models, slab avalanche theory, katabatic winds, behavioral impacts like paradoxical undressing. We'll distinguish established facts from speculation. Our aim, a balanced, science-based interpretation that honors the victims. The group was composed of 10 individuals, though only 9 would make the final, fateful leg of the journey. Most were students or recent graduates of the Ural Polytechnical Institute in Sverdlovsk, now Yekaterinburg. They were not novices. Each member was an experienced Grade 2 hiker with ski touring certification, a prerequisite for the more demanding trek they were about to undertake. They were bonded by a shared passion for the outdoors and the spirit of adventure that was actively encouraged in the Soviet Union at the time. Their leader was 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a radio engineering student known for his meticulous planning and steady leadership. He was respected by the group and had a reputation for being a thoughtful and capable expedition leader. The other members were equally skilled and enthusiastic. Zenaida Kolmogorova, 22, was a vibrant and resilient radio engineering student, often described as the energetic heart of the group. Lyudmila Dubinina, just 20 years old, was a student of economics, known for her toughness and cheerful disposition, having survived a hunting accident on a previous trip. Alexander Kolovatov, 24, was a student of nuclear physics, recognized for his quiet, methodical nature. Rustem Slobodin, 23, a graduate engineer, was the strong and athletic one. Yuri Krivnishenko, 23, an engineering graduate. Nicholas Thibault Brignol, 23, an engineering graduate. Yuri Doroshenko, 21, was a student of radio engineering. Semyon Alexander Zolotaryov, at 38, was the oldest and most mysterious member, an instructor who joined the group to earn his Master of Sports certification. On January 23, 1959, the group began their journey by train from Sverdlovsk. Their mood, captured in photographs and diary entries, was optimistic and full of camaraderie. They were a tight-knit team, well-versed in the challenges of winter expeditions. They sang songs, shared jokes, and documented the early stages of their adventure with a sense of purpose and excitement. This was to be a significant achievement, a test of their skills against one of the most formidable environments in the region. Their diaries speak of the normal routines of a long trek, daily mileage goals, equipment checks, and the simple joys of sharing a meal after a hard day's travel in the cold. There was no hint of the tragedy that was to come. The 10th member of the expedition was Yuri Yudin. Several days into the journey, a flare-up of chronic sciatic nerve pain and rheumatism made it impossible for him to continue. On January 28th, he said goodbye to his friends at a small settlement and turned back. A decision that would ultimately save his life. Yudin would be the last person to see the group alive. He would later play a crucial role in identifying the bodies and belongings of his friends. His reluctant departure marked the final moment of normalcy before the remaining 9 hikers pushed onward, deeper into the desolate wilderness of the northern Ural Mountains, toward their final campsite on the slopes of Kholat-Syakhl. The expedition was officially classified as a Category 3 trek, the highest difficulty rating for a sports route in the Soviet Union at that time. This classification was reserved for the most arduous and dangerous journeys, requiring participants to possess exceptional skill, physical endurance, and experience in winter survival. The group's goal was to travel approximately 300 kilometers, about 186 miles, through the uninhabited northern Urals on skis, culminating in the ascent of 2 prominent peaks, Otorten and Oika Chakur. Successfully completing such a route was a prestigious accomplishment, a testament to their prowess, and a significant step toward earning the coveted Master of Sports title, a high honor for Soviet athletes. Their route was carefully planned by Igor Dyatlov. The journey began in the town of Ivdel, followed by a truck ride to Vijay, the last inhabited settlement before the vast, empty wilderness. From there, they would travel by ski, following river valleys and ascending into the mountain highlands. The plan was methodical, with daily objectives and designated rest days. Dyatlov was required to submit his route plan to the Sverdlovsk City Sporting Club for approval, a standard procedure designed to ensure safety and oversight. According to this plan, the group was scheduled to send a telegram from Vijay on or around February 12th to signal the successful completion of their trek. When that telegram never arrived, the first quiet alarms began to sound. The culture of hiking, or tourism as it was called, was an important part of Soviet life. It was seen as a wholesome activity that built character, promoted physical fitness, and fostered a collective spirit. Their equipment, while rudimentary by modern standards, was the best available at the time. They carried canvas tents, wool clothing, felt boots, and heavy wooden skis. They were proficient in building snow shelters and navigating with a map and compass. Their preparation and experience level were considered more than adequate for the challenge they had set for themselves. This context is crucial for understanding the mystery. The members of the Dyatlov group were not amateurs who wandered into a dangerous situation unprepared. They were operating within the accepted norms and best practices of their time. They knew the risks of winter travel in the Urals, including extreme cold, high winds, and the potential for avalanches. Their actions, as documented in their diaries and photographs, show a team that was behaving competently and rationally right up until their final day. This makes the bizarre scene discovered at their last campsite all the more perplexing. Whatever happened to them was powerful enough to overwhelm 9 capable and experienced individuals. Section 1. The search begins. As the days passed beyond February 12th, the date Igor Dyatlov had promised to send a telegram from Vizhai, there was initially little alarm. Delays were common on such difficult expeditions. Weather could slow a group down. However, as the week stretched on and no word came, the families of the hikers grew increasingly anxious. Fellow students and staff at the Ural Polytechnical Institute began to pressure the sporting club and local authorities to initiate a search. By February 20th, with the group more than a week overdue, the Institute organized the first volunteer search parties, composed of students and teachers who knew the hikers and the terrain. The official search, involving military and civilian aircraft, soon followed. The search efforts were vast and challenging. The planned route covered a huge, remote area, and the severe winter conditions hampered visibility and movement. Airplanes and helicopters scanned the endless white landscape, looking for any sign of the 9 missing skiers. On the ground, multiple search teams on skis began to systematically follow the group's intended path, battling deep snow and biting winds. For several days, their efforts yielded nothing. The breakthrough came on February 26th. A pilot flying over the region spotted something unusual on the slope of Kholat Syakhl. A search party led by a student named Boris Slobtsov headed toward the specified location. As they approached, they found the group's ski tracks, which led them up the slope, and there, partially buried in snow, they found the camp. It was a profoundly unsettling scene. The large custom-built canvas tent was collapsed and clearly abandoned. There was no sign of the hikers. The initial relief of finding the camp quickly turned to deep concern. The searchers called out the names of their friends, hoping for a response, but only the wind answered. It was immediately clear that something had gone terribly wrong. The team began the grim task of examining the site, meticulously documenting every detail, and the clues they were about to uncover would only raise more questions than answers. Upon closer inspection, the state of the tent was deeply disturbing. The canvas had been sliced and ripped open from the inside. This was perhaps the most baffling clue. In a life-threatening blizzard, a tent is the single most important piece of survival gear. To willingly destroy it and flee was an act that defied all logic. Inside the tent, the searchers found a scene of eerie order amidst the chaos. Backpacks were lined up, spare clothes were folded, the hikers' diaries were present, money was present, personal documents were present, 8 or 9 pairs of boots were found, ice axes were left behind, knives were left behind. The only things missing were the hikers themselves. A trail of footprints led down the slope toward a distant tree line about 1.5 kilometers away. The tracks told a chilling story. They were made by 8 or 9 people. Some prints were made by bare feet, others by feet clad only in socks, a few by a single felt boot, Valenka. The prints were not chaotic. They descended in a relatively orderly line, suggesting the group left together. The footprints continued for about 500 meters before they disappeared under wind-blown snow. The scene presented a chilling contradiction. Violent exit from the tent suggested panic, yet the orderly trail suggested a controlled retreat. Why would 9 experienced hikers abandon shelter, warm clothing, and boots to walk barefoot into a blizzard? Following the direction of the footprints down the slope, the search party made their way toward the forest edge. There, under a massive ancient cedar tree, they made their first grim discovery. Yuri Krivonyshenko, Yuri Doroshenko. They were stripped down to their underwear. The men were barefoot and clearly not dressed for the cold. Nearby were the scattered remains of a small fire. The cedar's branches were broken up to 5 meters. It suggested someone had tried to climb the tree, perhaps to escape. The scene under the cedar painted a desperate struggle for survival. The fire had been small and insufficient. Their hands were scraped and bruised from gathering wood and climbing. Yet, despite the fire, both had succumbed to hypothermia. The search continued. The following day, 3 more bodies were found between cedar and tent. Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, Rustem Slobodin. He was about 300 meters from the cedar, on his back, face toward camp. One hand clutched a small birch branch. His posture suggested he had been crawling back up the slope to the tent. She was found similarly trying to return, more warmly dressed, but still inadequate. He was between Dyatlov and Kolmogorova, facing the tent. His death was listed as hypothermia, but a later exam found a small fracture in his skull. The 3 bodies suggested part of the group tried to return for their gear. They began the climb back up the exposed slope and froze before reaching the tent. But 4 hikers were still missing. Worse discoveries were yet to come. The initial autopsies on the first 5 bodies found were conducted in early March 1959. Yuri Doroshenko, Yuri Krivonyshenko, Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, Rustem Slobodin. The medical examiner's conclusion was straightforward. The official cause of death for all 5 was determined to be hypothermia. Their bodies showed the classic signs of freezing to death. There were abrasions on their hands and faces, consistent with falling in the snow and their desperate attempts to climb the cedar tree or crawl back up the slope. However, these injuries were superficial. The medical examiner, Boris Vozrojdeny, found no fatal internal trauma that could explain their deaths, confirming they had succumbed to the extreme cold. The state of their bodies told a story of a slow, agonizing fight against the elements. The lack of adequate clothing meant their bodies lost heat rapidly. Dyatlov facing uphill towards the tent. Kolmogorova facing uphill towards the tent. It was a tragic, but, from a medical standpoint, understandable scenario. One finding, however, added a small but puzzling detail. Rustem Slobodin was discovered to have a small fracture in his skull. The fracture was described as being about 6 centimeters long, but was not considered a fatal injury. It was not a blow that would have immediately incapacitated him, but it could have caused disorientation. The origin of this fracture was never determined. It could have been caused by a fall on the icy, rocky ground as he stumbled in the dark. This small detail was the first hint that the story might be more complex. It was a minor note, but it foreshadowed the much more perplexing evidence that would be uncovered with the discovery of the final 4 hikers. It was not until May 4th, more than 2 months after the initial search, that the remaining 4 hikers were found. A search team discovered them buried under 4 meters of snow in a den-like hollow within a ravine. The bodies were those of Lyudmila Dubinina, Semyon Zolotaryov, Alexander Kolovatov, and Nicolas Thibault-Brignol. What the medical examiner found when he examined these 4 bodies would become the central and most disturbing element of the Dyatlov Pass mystery. These hikers had not simply frozen to death. They had suffered catastrophic internal injuries. Lyudmila Dubinina was found with extensive, symmetrical fractures to her ribs. Semyon Zolotaryov was found with extensive, symmetrical fractures to his ribs. Dr. Vozrojdeny, the medical examiner, compared the force required to cause such damage to that of a direct car crash. Nicolas Thibault-Brignol had sustained a massive fracture to the side of his skull. The most baffling aspect of these injuries was the almost complete lack of corresponding external trauma. There were no soft tissue bruises or open wounds. Dr. Vazrajdeni was adamant in his report that these injuries could not have been caused by another human being. He stated definitively that the hikers had been subjected to an immense crushing force. The investigation was now faced with two distinct sets of victims and a series of events that seemed to contradict each other, making a comprehensive explanation seem almost impossible. Adding to the strangeness of the scene in the ravine were the post-mortem injuries found on two of the victims. Lyudmila Dubinina was missing her tongue, her eyes, and parts of her lips and facial tissue. Semyon Zolotaryov was also missing his eyeballs. These gruesome details have been the source of some of the wildest speculation over the years. However, the forensic explanation is far more mundane. The bodies had been lying in a snowmelt den, partially submerged in running water, for nearly 3 months. This wet environment accelerated the process of natural decomposition. The missing soft tissues are consistent with putrefaction and scavenging by small animals. The tongue and eyes are composed of very soft, protein-rich tissue, which would be the first areas to decompose. Another element that has fueled conspiracy theories was the discovery of trace amounts of radioactivity on some of the hikers' clothing. This finding immediately led to speculation about secret military weapons testing. Was the group accidentally exposed to a radioactive experiment? This theory seemed to connect the strange events, but the evidence for it is weak. The levels of radiation detected were very low. Furthermore, two of the hikers, Alexander Kolevatov and Yuri Krivonishenko, had previously worked at facilities involved in the production of nuclear materials. It is highly plausible that their clothing was contaminated with small amounts of radioactive dust from their workplace. The investigation concluded that the radiation was not a contributing factor in their deaths. Like the missing soft tissue, it was a strange detail that, upon closer examination, had a likely and non-mysterious explanation. After 3 months of investigation, the case was officially closed in late May 1959. The lead prosecutor, Lev Ivanov, was faced with a collection of seemingly contradictory evidence. Unable to formulate a single coherent theory, Ivanov wrote a final, now famous conclusion. He stated that the hikers had died as a result of a compelling natural force which they were unable to overcome. The decision to close the case and classify the files was a product of its time. In the Cold War-era Soviet Union, any event that was unexplained was often suppressed. The files were sent to a secret archive. In a 1990 interview, Lev Ivanov admitted that he had been pressured by regional officials to close the case quickly. He also revealed his own private theory, speaking of seeing bright flying spheres in the sky around the time of the incident. Ultimately, the initial investigation failed to provide a concrete answer. The compelling natural force conclusion was an admission that the authorities did not know what happened, or if they did, they were unwilling to say. This official silence created an information vacuum. One of the most widely discussed theories is that the group was forced to flee by an avalanche, specifically a small slab avalanche. This occurs when a cohesive layer of snow slides off a weaker layer underneath. The hikers cut into the snowpack to set up their tent. That cut may have destabilized the slope above them. Hours later, snow accumulation and wind pressure built on the slope. A small block of snow could have slid down onto the tent. It explains the panic and why they cut their way out. It also provides a mechanism for injuries. The severe chest compression on Dubinina and Zolotaryov matches the examiner's report. Immense pressure, without major external wounds. But the theory has critics. The slope above the tent was only about 23 degrees. Searchers found no debris field or large fracture line. The tent was not completely flattened. Another idea, katabatic winds. Katabatic winds are powerful, dense currents of cold air down a mountainside. A wind event could strike with incredible force, producing a deafening roar and threatening to rip the tent. An essential component of any credible explanation is the role of hypothermia in the hiker's behavior. As the body's core temperature drops, mental functions become severely impaired. Confusion, disorientation, poor judgment. One of the most bizarre behaviors associated with fatal hypothermia is known as paradoxical undressing. In the final stages of freezing to death, around 20 to 50% of victims are found partially or fully undressed. It's believed warm blood rushes from the body's core, creating a sensation of being hot. Another theory that focuses on a natural perception-altering event is the infrasound hypothesis. Under specific wind conditions, the topography around Kholat-Syakhl could have created a Kármán vortex street, which can generate very low-frequency sound waves, infrasound. While intriguing, the infrasound hypothesis has significant limitations. There is no direct evidence that such a weather event occurred that night, and it doesn't explain the severe physical trauma seen in the ravine victims. In recent years, the slab avalanche theory has gained significant traction thanks to advanced scientific modeling. In 2021, a study by researchers from Switzerland's EPFL and ETH Zurich provided a compelling new analytical model. Their work demonstrated how a combination of environmental factors could have triggered a small but powerful slab slide hours after the hikers set up their camp. The hikers had cut into the snowpack, creating a weak point. Above this, katabatic winds and fresh snowfall caused a buildup. This modern model effectively explains the key mysteries. The delayed nature of the slide accounts for why they were in the tent. The slide would have been a sudden fracture and release of a slab, perhaps 5 meters wide, large enough to partially collapse the tent and exert immense pressure. This explanation elegantly connects the damage to the tent, the panicked exit, and the most perplexing injuries, framing them not as a series of unrelated strange events, but as the direct consequences of a single, scientifically plausible natural phenomenon. By combining the modern slab avalanche model with our understanding of human physiology, we can construct a coherent and logical timeline. The night begins with the hikers settled in their tent. Hours later, a small slab of dense snow releases and slides onto the tent. Fearing a second avalanche, the group cuts their way out and evacuates. They move together down the slope toward the forest. Reaching the cedar tree, they make a desperate attempt to start a fire. As the fire fails, the group likely splits. Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin decide their only chance is to return to the tent. They begin the arduous crawl back up the exposed slope, but collapse and freeze. Meanwhile, the remaining 4 hikers, including the 2 already severely injured, seek better shelter deeper in the woods. They find a ravine and dig into a snow den. In the relative shelter, the group faces its final moments. The injured are already in a grave condition. Ultimately, their injuries and the overwhelming cold prove fatal. This synthesis provides a logical, fact-based narrative that accounts for nearly all the evidence without resorting to speculation about military weapons or mythical creatures. The story of the Dyatlov Pass incident has persisted for over 6 decades, not because of monsters or secret weapons, but because the initial scene was so profoundly difficult to interpret. The Cold War secrecy of the Soviet Union amplified the mystery. Over time, a more rational, scientifically grounded explanation has emerged. A delayed slab avalanche, severe hypothermia and its physiological effects. Together, they provide a coherent framework that explains most of the evidence. This reframes the incident from paranormal speculation to a tragic, step-by-step survival failure. They were victims of a rare and unfortunate combination of natural circumstances. The story is ultimately not one of mystery but of tragedy. It was not a creature nor a conspiracy, but the brutal and indifferent physics of snow, wind, and cold. Igor Dyatlov, Lyudmila Dubinina, Yuri Doroshenko, Zinaida Kolmogorova, Alexander Kolovatov, Yuri Krivonishenko, Rustem Slobodin, Nicolas Thibault-Brignol, Semyon Zolotaryov. Their memory should not be defined by paranormal folklore. Remember them as the capable, courageous young adventurers they were, who met a tragic end in the magnificent but merciless Ural Mountains. Their story is a human one, deserving of quiet reflection and respectful curiosity.